In the race to become the Republican candidate for US president, property billionaire Donald Trump seems firmly in the lead. His campaign has included social media comments, insulting his enemies and opponents, plus attention-grabbing, controversial remarks. Now, nearly half of US Republicans are backing him, giving this celebrity maverick a 33-point lead. His support comes from many sources, including David Duke, a former leader of the white supremacist group known as the Klux Klan, who said not backing Trump was treason to your heritage. Trump himself has attacked Muslims, immigrants, and other minorities. He drew criticism for promising to temporarily ban all Muslims from entering America. He also chose to quote Italian fascist dictator Benito Mussolini on social media, tweeting, "It is better to live one day as a lion than 100 years as a sheep." What would a Trump victory mean for religious persecution? What is currently driving American politics? And what are the dangers of a Trump presidency to the world? These are the simple questions we sought to answer. Let's start with this. Why has Donald Trump refused to condemn the most famous white supremacist terrorist organization, the Ku Klux Klan? That's what we put to the American public.
Because he's a game show host. He's not a real serious person. He likes to be popular. And he's a racist, so it fits for him.
That's a good question. I have to put some thought to that. I think that Trump is not really sure why I don't really have much of an answer. I don't know. He's idiotic, you know. He's somebody who doesn't really think, I don't think, that much before he speaks, and so he wanted to think about it before he did anything, before he said anything.
Well, I can't tell you why Donald Trump does anything. My only thought about it is that he is trying to appeal to his voters, and he's being sensationalist and trying to get a lot of attention.
I'm not sure why he has not done that.
He says he has, and it's the media that's kind of making it a big deal.
I don't know. I don't know why.
I believe maybe he believes in him. He believes in that white supremacist. Otherwise, he would condemn that. So, I mean, somebody, if you believe in something, so why would you condemn it? That's what I think.
I have no idea.
Because he doesn't care, because he is a white supremacist, and if you just hear about his foreign policy ideas, he doesn't care. He is a supremacist.
There's no question. The man's an idiot. Next question.
That's, I think he did. He did it belatedly, but he I don't know the exact timing. He was asked by Jake Tapper the day after he was endorsed, and he apparently pretended or thought he didn't know about it, but the next day he did condemn it.
I don't know. I haven't talked to him, but it seems a bit unorthodox not to do it.
I think it helps him get some extra votes.
Our experts offered their analysis of Donald Trump's refusal to condemn this white supremacist terrorist group.
Donald Trump knows where his voter base is. He knows that a lot of the votes that he gets are in the southern regions, and they come from voters who are dissatisfied with establishment politics, and some of whom have very racist undertones. So his refusal to condemn the Ku Klux Klan has very little to do with his actual belief, but more to do with what he understands his voter base to be.
Because he knows a lot of his support comes from white supremacists and racists, both ones that dress up in costumes about it, because they feel that so much, and pleasant ones who are just a little bit afraid of black children and listen to rap. Do you know what I mean? Those nice people. Like, he knows that, and he knows that he can't really offend them that much by retracting his statement. Like, Trump supremacy is about making himself seem powerful, destroying anyone who attacks him, no matter what damage that might do to himself, and it's a little bit about white supremacy as well.
If Donald Trump were to become the President of the United States, What damage does the public think he would do to the world?
Donald Trump would do a lot of damage to the world if he became president, I think. It would be horrible for the world's security. It would be bad for everyone.
I think he has an isolationist policy, which I don't think is really good for the United States or the world.
That's hard to see too. It could be a lot of things about how people think of the United States might think of the United States differently. I think that would depend from country to country and from region to region. But I think it would definitely be interesting to see how that unfolds. It's hard to really give you a yes or no answer to that, though. Yeah.
Well, I think he's a dangerous man. He's a very dangerous man. He's the way what he says. If he really does what he says, not only for the United States but also for the world security, I think he'll be a dangerous man. And if he thinks he's going to go bomb everybody, he's going to bomb every country, the way he expresses himself, I think it's very dangerous.
You know, our country is known as the melting pot of the world, and I think that he's trying to cut off all of that. And that's what makes our country so diverse, and so it's like a passionate place, and he's just trying to cut off all of our ties to everywhere else in the world, which I think is a horrible idea. So
I don't know.
Wow, that's always hard to predict. We've seen unexpected things from people, some good and bad, so hard to predict.
A lot would be my answer, but specifically probably ruining foreign relations, and I have no idea what he would do to the economy, but it probably wouldn't be the best.
I think he's already doing damage, internationally and, our reputation abroad. But if he became president, honestly, I can't even imagine, having a crazy person in the White House. Definitely wouldn't help.
I don't know, but it won't be good.
Well, my hope is that the checks and balances would work, much as he would like it to be his own little dictatorship. I think once a person gets into office, they find out that there's a lot going on, and you can't just have a whim and have it happen. I think he already has done a lot of damage because he promotes the ideas that he promotes that are not inclusive, not American, not humanistic. I mean, a lot of other countries have what we call American ideals. It's not that we own them, but decency is something that should be strived for, and he's not that interested in it because it doesn't really pad his pocket.
The potential damage is almost unimaginable. Increased conflict, loss of financial stabilities, the loss of civil rights in our own country here in America and around the world. I can't think of a worse man to ever be president of the United States.
Our experts gave their assessment of the potential impact of a Trump presidency on the world stage.
I think it's important to say that Donald Trump is unlikely to become president. But were he to become president, I think the biggest damage would be the narrative and the discourse that he perpetuates really influencing and penetrating national politics and international politics. So the most harm that I see Donald Trump doing if he becomes president is that the things he says, the discourse that he pushes forward would come mainstream into the international sphere, into the domestic sphere, and it would almost give credence to the ideas that Donald puts across.
I recently saw the movie The Siege from 1998, and I think that's a really good barometer as to what would happen if Trump was president. So there would be, anyone who looks like a Muslim would be in makeshift internment camps in sports stadiums. The army would have free reign, there would be curfews, and Denzel Washington wouldn't be very happy.
Trump has defended his decision to quote one of the West's famous fascist dictators, Benito Mussolini. Why is Trump using this as part of his election campaign? We asked the public what they thought.
I guess I could say because he's an idiot, but because he has no conscience, he has no awareness, he's just like a talking bubblehead that only measures attention. I don't think he's thought about it, but he is enough of a psychopath that if he thought about it, he would probably like it.
I don't know anything. I can't comment on that.
Again, I don't know what his motivations are because I don't know what's behind his political campaign, but I think that really what he's doing is trying to appeal to a certain segment of the country.
I'm not his campaign manager.
I feel like his follower base is kind of the exotic, extreme Republican side of the party, and I feel like they almost like that he is on this extreme side of it, and he is just pushing it more. So I don't understand it, but he seems to have a follower base, which makes no sense to me.
You know, despite the fact that he went to some prestigious Ivy League schools, I don't know that he's that smart or knows where that quote came from.
Yeah, his Twitter repost. I think he just doesn't care about how people view him. I think he doesn't, mind at all. So he knows he'll get media coverage by retweeting dictators and crazy quotes. So honestly, I think that's the reason why he's quoting fascist dictators and silly things like that. He knows he'll get more media coverage, and more media coverage equals more votes, and more votes means he can keep rolling over all of his rivals in the GOP.
I don't know.
Because it appeals to the lowest class of American voters who are mad about what's going on in the world, and they don't care where they draw their inspiration from.
I think it's the same reason he's using a lot of things for his election campaign, to get media coverage. There's outrage for it, therefore the media latches onto it, and he gets coverage, and people know his name.
What is the reasoning behind Trump's apparent willingness to reference the Italian dictator as part of his election campaign? We asked our experts.
So the reason that Donald Trump is using these high-profile fascist figures or some of these quotes that have come from very, very offensive circles is that the campaign that he's running isn't new. This sort of divisive, fear-mongering, hate-mongering sort of campaign has happened before, and it's wielded success across Europe and in North America as well. So one of the reasons he's probably pulling quotes from speakers or politicians or famous figures that's been mentioned is because those sort of figures have won and been successful in the sort of campaign and the sort of narrative that they perpetuate.
Trump says he would temporarily ban all Muslims from entering the US. Could his presidency bring back an era of systematic religious persecution? Let's hear from the public.
I don't think that would ever happen. I don't think that the American people would stand for that. I think he's making those kinds of statements because he's trying to appeal to fear with the population that he is speaking to, which is a disenfranchised white middle class of America. And so I think he's just trying to get a lot of attention, but I think that the majority of Americans would never ever tolerate any form of systematic religious persecution or intolerance.
I choose to believe in what's left of democracy and checks and balances, and that I don't know of any president in my lifetime that's been able to go into office and do everything he wanted to do willy-nilly. Even the Congress has to go along with it, so I don't think he would be allowed to.
I don't think it would come to that. I think the American people are too strong for that to happen.
I don't think so.
No, United States has a constitution. There is a constitution in the United States. There's a freedom of religions in the United States. That thing will never happen. I mean, he can say whatever he says, but that will not happen.
Definitely. I think that's all that he's advocating for. And I honestly don't understand how we could elect a president like that. I don't think that our Constitution or anything allows for that. So I don't see that ever working out.
You know, I don't think that Donald Trump is a person of very strong religious beliefs at all. He's more of a secular agnostic, and so I don't think that will be a big issue with Trump.
I don't think religious persecution by the federal government, but definitely endangering minorities and religious groups, because it validates the views of hateful people who are not in power to do unthinkable and unjustified things to minorities, like run around and beat people up or be exclusive in who they let into their private establishments, because they feel that Donald Trump's views that he voices validates them in doing that.
That's a hard question. I mean, I think there's a lot of people in the U.S. who would stand against this kind of behavior, and I know that if the president were doing things that were illegal, I would absolutely stand up and march and make sure things like that can't happen. So I know there's checks and balances, but at the same time, it is really scary, the thought of somebody who has such extreme reactions to things and doesn't think through things in the White House and in a place of power.
I hope not. That would definitely be a horrible thing.
Absolutely, as long as the Congress allows it. And with a Republican Congress, he has an excellent chance.
I don't think in America we would have any systematic persecution of religion. I think that a lot of rhetoric happens during a campaign. A lot of people say things that can never really come to pass and can never really happen. And this is part of his rhetoric to appeal to the people who want to vote for him.
Have our experts been able to interpret the consequences for religious persecution if President Trump were installed in the White House?
The systematic persecution, if we're going to use that word for lack of a better term, of Muslims is already happening in the United States. It's already happening across Europe. The sort of barriers that are put in place for Muslims, the political rhetoric that's used against Muslims and minority communities is already a problem within the Western political sphere. If the sort of things that Trump says about banning Muslims entering the UK until we figure out what's going on is the oldest form of racism. It's extreme. It's not rooted in ideology or a genuine concern for safety of Americans. It's racism at its purest, and I think that the sooner that we realize that this is a genuine problem and it's something we have to deal with outside of Trump's presidency campaign, the quicker that we can deal with this as a society, both here in the UK but also internationally as well.
Like we're already seeing at his rallies, black and Muslim people who have said nothing, who all they've done is turned up or they've stood up, being kicked out, beaten up and kicked out by the Secret Service. Not by the security of the event, not by Trump's personal security, but by the United States Secret Service. And I think a lot of people thought that it's funny, or that when Trump gets in, the people in power, the people that we already think are bad, are going to think, oh, this guy's ridiculous, and laugh him off. But it's already happening. He has certain power because you're allowed to have Secret Service agents if you're running for president, and he's using them to enact racist violence on people and persecuting them and kicking them out of places and beating them up.
Polls show that nearly half of US Republicans will vote for billionaire Donald Trump. Does the public feel US politics is based more on democratic values or money?
Well, I think that's a little bit more difficult. You say polls show 50% of people would vote for Donald Trump, but Donald Trump in the Republican primaries is only polling about 35% of the voters. So I think that Republicans in general represent roughly 40% of the American voting population. So 35% of 40% is 28% of the population, something like that. It's much, you have to excuse my math, I'm doing it on the fly. But I think that his, if it comes down to voting for, two people, some people will have to choose the lesser of two evils. But I don't think his support is as widespread as maybe portrayed.
Democratic values.
There's some big problems right now with money in politics, and lots of other candidates are speaking out about that. Bernie Sanders and even Hillary Clinton. But all politicians have accepted money, and I can't give as much money as other people can. So being able to have more balance in politics, so that your vote actually counts, and my vote counts just as much as somebody who can give millions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars. The fact that he's, Donald Trump is self-funding his campaign absolutely helps him to run easier. If I could self-fund my own campaign, I'm sure that would give me a leg up.
Democratic values, I guess.
In general, people believe in a democracy. It's a democratic country. They believe in democracy. I don't think it has to do anything with money. Him himself, yeah, probably with his money, just because he's a billionaire. Yeah, for him it might be the money, but for people, it's democracy.
It's based on money. The whole campaign is money based, and if you look at the numbers of the funds and stuff, just like Bernie Sanders is trying to defund the political campaign process, Donald Trump and his whole campaign is based upon that, and without that, I don't think he'd have the base that he has.
I think currently, Bill Moyers, I can't pronounce the word, but I think it's an oligarchy. Anyway, it's rich people running the show. But again, I think that we're seeing the fruition of all of that. The great thing about an unsustainable ideal or policy is that it cannot be sustained. It's not an emotional opinion whether or not it can be sustained. It can't. And I think we're seeing the demise of not the Republican Party, because what we've had for the past 15 years is not the Republican Party. But whatever it is, I think it's coming to a head, and it has to die.
Politics, because it's run by politicians, is based on money and power more. But I think that there are democratic values within the United States. However, the people who hold those dear are less likely to be the ones running for public office or running for large public office.
With such a commanding lead for Donald Trump, what does it tell us about the role of money versus values in US politics? Here's what we learned from our experts.
It's no great secret that campaign finance reform is needed in the United States, and that money influences the political candidates you see and the ultimate results of the election. Now, I think that binary question is slightly difficult to answer, because I think the biggest problem within this election, and the thing that influences this election the most, is an economic and social dissatisfaction within the constituents, and that's resulting in candidates who aren't seen to be part of the political establishment making way. Now, it's no great secret that Donald is able to say the things he is and is able to run the campaign he is because he's self-financing, which means he doesn't have to go out looking for donors, doesn't need to do fundraising with organizations that might say, you know what you're saying here isn't quite right, what you're saying here isn't quite right. So certainly money plays too big of a factor in American politics, and democratic values are severely lacking. But I think it's wider than that. It's economic problems within lower socioeconomic communities. It's problems within social justice and equality. But Donald is only able to do the things he does and say the things he does because he is a billionaire and he self-finances his campaign.
US politics, as well as politics here in the UK and a lot of the Western world, is already based mostly on money. When their lives are being improved today and tomorrow, like they're being told, listen, we can take your kids on holiday. Just vote for this thing for us. Why are they don't care about listening to us. The democratic process has already been corrupted, and it's already been completely distorted, and it doesn't exist that much anymore. Money's everywhere. I don't think. Yeah, I think what Trump's doing is basically saying, I'm unbuyable. No one can buy me because I've got so much money.
Trump's racial and anti-Muslim statements point to a crisis in US identity and present a challenge to core values such as freedom and democracy. As the campaign trail rhetoric grows ever more provocative, a sense of fatalism has consumed the US Republican movement and the politics of the country. In the battle to become Republican presidential candidate, Donald Trump seems unstoppable. If he wins that contest, many are now asking what even greater battles could lie ahead.